Hey, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you. Happy holidays. It is the Jaguar preview edition of the Utopia Football Podcast, recording this on Thanksgiving morning as I get ready to go chow down. You're probably hearing this on Friday. Don't know that anything significant is going to or will have happened today on Thursday after I record this. So if anything does, know that this is being recorded with the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade on in the background, and with about an hour and change to go until we're kicking off Lions and Bears here on Thanksgiving. It's the best holiday of the year because you have football and food and a whole lot of fun. And a reminder, too, if you're hearing this on Friday morning, that we are in at Sports Radio 610 on Friday. So Payne and Pendergast, we will be there. I believe the guys on In the Loop are going to be out on location somewhere. I forget where. I apologize. But keep it tuned to Sports Radio 610. Then I think we've got some football on in the afternoon. Some of these college games going on. Should be an amazing weekend of college football. Chaos. The 12-team playoff has been a thumbs up for me so far. I was a big 14 playoff advocate, but I think the combination of the 12-team playoff, along with all the parity that NIL and the transfer portal has created, it's wide open. There's no distinct tiers of team. I mean, there's tiers. There's a handful of heavy favorites, but I think, for example, I think Penn State is a seriously, for 10-1, they're a flawed football team. They're fourth in the country right now. Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois earlier this year. They're fifth in the country right now. Oregon is the only undefeated team, and I don't look at them as one of those classic, Nick Saban, Alabama-style juggernauts, right? So we'll see. I mean, they play Washington this weekend, and they're in the Big Ten championship game. I'm anxious to see what type of intrigue it brings to conference title weekend. I've long thought that the college football playoff should create some sort of meaningfulness with the conference championships, and that's what it's going to do. The top four conference champions are going to get a bye. Although I'd almost rather my team get a home playoff game on campus. That's going to be a whole lot of fun. So anyways, this is not a college football podcast, but I'm just giving my opinion on that as we get going here. A quick reminder, subscribe, rate, review the podcast. If you can share it with folks as well who then subscribe, that's how we grow this thing. The numbers are really good year over year for the podcast, but want to keep growing it, want to keep doing it. So appreciate everybody who is on board. Quick reminder, too, if you want to email the show, best to email. The mailbag is going to run on Wednesdays now. So if you're going to send an email before Sunday's game, just make sure it's something that evergreens. If you're asking me a question in the email about Sunday's game against the Jags, it's not going to get answered. I don't look at the inbox for the mailbag until Monday at the earliest. So I just don't want you guys to waste your time sending in, hey, Sean, what do you think about Trevor Lawrence this coming Sunday if he starts instead of Mac Jones? I'm not going to see that email until after the game's over. So if you send something now, just make sure it evergreens fine for Wednesday next week and that the outcome of the game doesn't affect it at all. But houmailbag@gmail.com. We do 3 episodes a week. Monday morning, we drop the recap of the previous day's game. Wednesday is the mailbag. Friday is the preview of the upcoming game. That's how we do during the regular season. We've still got 5 more of these, hopefully more in the postseason as well. 89% chance right now the Texans have to make the postseason. Does it feel like 89% to you? They're 2-4 in their last 6 games. 89% feels a little rich, except when you realize it's the Colts chasing them. Now, the Colts are favored in at least 4 of their next 5 games. So this could get very interesting. This is a good lead-in, actually, to the 6-pack for this Jacksonville game because this is one of those games. I already thought it would be a disaster if they lost to the Titans. Well, here we are. They're 7-5. Thankfully, the Colts lost to the Lions. So somehow the Texans, after beating the Colts and moving to 8-2 and moving to 6-2 and taking a 2-game lead with the tiebreaker, they've gone 1-3 in their next 4 games. And thanks to the Colts sucking, they've managed to maintain that 2-game lead with the tiebreaker. Texans schedule significantly harder than the Colts schedule over the final 5 games. So there's nothing on the schedule. Hardest game the Colts have is at Denver, who's a fringe playoff team. The Texans play the Dolphins, Chiefs, and Ravens within an 11-day period. So I say all that to say this is kind of a must-win on Sunday with the Jags. You lose this one, and now all of a sudden you're in a world where you have to win at least one of those games, in all likelihood, maybe even 2, against the against the Dolphins, Chiefs, and Ravens. So let's not put ourselves in that position, Texans. Let's take care of business. And how are they going to take care of business? Well, let's look at it in the pregame six-pack for the Jacksonville and Houston game. Texans a 5-point favorite going into this game on Sunday. All right, we start with the first can. Road Sweet Road, we'll call this. There are two, and this isn't anything X's and O's about this game. This is just more of an interesting factoid, and I think something that if you're a Texan fan probably makes you feel, makes you feel a little bit better about this game coming up. Or maybe you're a nihilist and you feel like, okay, well, then the Texans are due to lose a game. Here's what I'm talking about. There are two fairly remarkable streaks on the line in this game. The Texans have won 9 straight road games in the AFC South. Keep in mind, this is not a period of Texans football where they've been the equivalent of the Ravens or the Chiefs. This is a period. These 9 straight road wins go back to David Culley, Lovie Smith. Lovie Smith's 3 wins as Texans head coach were all road wins in the AFC South. At Tennessee, at Jacksonville, and of course at Indy that secured C.J. Stroud in Week 18. And then obviously D'Amico going 3-0 on the road in the division last year against Jacksonville, Indy, and Tennessee. So 9 straight road wins in the AFC South, and the Texans have one from earlier this year, the Colts game back in Week 1. So that is a fairly remarkable streak, considering that a big chunk of that was involved Texans teams that were picking second and third in the draft. The other streak that's more poignant to this one is the Texans have not lost in Jacksonville since 2017. They've won 6 straight road games against Jacksonville. One of those was a London game in 2019. But the incredible thing about that streak to me is there were 5 different Texan head coaches involved in that streak. Again, this is a period of time in Texans football where there shouldn't be streaks like this. And I guess it just goes to show you how bad the AFC South and how bad Jacksonville has been over that period of time. But Bill O'Brien had 2 wins, 2018, the 2019 win in London. And then Romeo Crennel had a win over the Jags on the road in 2020 as the interim coach. David Culley in 2021 beat the Jags in Jacksonville as well. Lovie Smith in 2022 beat the Jags in Jacksonville. And then D'Amico Ryans, obviously last year, his first win as Texans head coach in 2023 was against the Jacksonville Jaguars in Week 3. Really, C.J. Stroud's kind of coming out party. He had a really good game in Week 2 statistically, but that was a game where he had a really good game, and they won by 20 in a game that they were 7-point underdogs on the road. Now, keep in mind, too, that was a period of time in Jacksonville. I know everybody looks back at the end of the year in Jacksonville, and they went 1-5 down the stretch. I mean, that was a period of time where Jacksonville was still building an 8-3 record to start the season. So we'll see. I mean, compared to some of those other wins that the Texans have had, if I had to guess, this is the biggest favorite the Texans have been since those O'Brien teams in 2018 and 2019. If I had to guess, that's something good to look up. I think I'll look that up when I get done with the podcast. But Road Sweet Road, we'll call that. They're actually going to an environment where they've played very comfortably in. Number 2, and these are actual keys to the game. They got to heat up whoever's playing quarterback. It looks like it's going to be Trevor Lawrence right now playing quarterback. The reports seem to indicate that he's getting most of the reps with the ones. So that would appear to be the case. Maybe they're just saying, you know what, it might be Mac Jones. I don't know if Mac getting any reps with the ones is going to help him at all. He sucks that bad. But I'm anticipating Trevor Lawrence playing here. And Trevor Lawrence can be very turnover prone, very first read. So the Texans have to do the one thing that they've been doing well all year long, which is pressuring quarterbacks. Danielle Hunter leads the NFL in pressures. He's second in sacks with 10.5. Will Anderson Jr. came back last week from his ankle injury. He had a couple of sacks in that game. Didn't get a full workload, but was productive while he was in there. He's got 9.5 sacks this year. Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter are 2 and 3 on the odds board for NFL Defensive Player of the Year right now, behind TJ Watt. So that's part of the thing. Like, what the Texans are 7-5 and they're leading the division, but compared to expectations, that's below expectations for this team. It would be a real shame if the Texans squandered such a great season from these 2 edge rushers by going one and done in the playoffs, or by not making the playoffs at all. Danielle Hunter's been incredible. I can't even remember one time this year, you know, all these guys on the Texans who played well have all been battling injury at some point or another during the season. I can't even remember a time during this season when Danielle Hunter even had to go to a knee like get attention or anything like that. He is a superhero, man. So whoever's playing quarterback, they got to heat him up. Mac Jones has been terrible the 2 games that he started for Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence ain't been all that good either. He's 2-12 as a starter since beating the Texans in week 12 last year. That was the game where Matt Amendola boinked a 58-yard game-tying field goal off the crossbar. So heat up whoever is playing quarterback. Can number 3, replacing Jalen Petrie is something to keep an eye on. Replacing Jalen Petrie at safety and all the big plays that he's made. You go back to that Indy game and that interception right before the half. That was the difference in that game. Texans were able to get a cheap touchdown at the end of the half. The tip ball that turned into a Jimmy Ward pick against the Lions. Obviously, the big hit in the Dallas game that caused that second fumble on the play where Derek Barnett scooped and scored. Jalen Petrie's been around the ball a lot. Jalen Petrie is a very unique weapon. I had a texter to Payne and Pendergast say, I'm actually encouraged the silver lining in Petrie getting injured. And the thing that gave this particular texter encouragement is the fact that it does feel painful losing him shows you how far Petrie has come as a player since last season when he really wasn't being used all that great. So Jimmy Ward's going to replace him as sort of that nickel/star, whatever it is we're calling it. Good news is Jimmy Ward had a pick 6 last week once Jalen went out of the game. So Jimmy Ward's got some experience there. I think my concern would be that Jimmy Ward is very injury prone. So if you lose Jimmy Ward, then what are you doing at that nickel corner position? So this is a slippery slope right now the Texans are on. Petrie's not been great in coverage this year, but he's been a very, very good player overall. Certainly whatever issues he's had in coverage have been more than balanced out by the big plays he's been able to make. So we'll see what happens. Now, the good news is they're going up against the Jaguars team that is limited weapons-wise right now. Their top 3 receivers coming into the year were Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, and Brian Thomas Jr., the rookie out of LSU. The only one that's still healthy is Thomas. The other 2 are out for the rest of the season. So he's their sole threat. I would imagine that means Stingley's probably going to follow him around, a little LSU on LSU violence right there. But in the first game between these 2 teams back in week 4, Thomas had 6 catches for 86 yards and a touchdown. And he was open a few other times where Trevor Lawrence just missed him. He's a really, really good football player. So replacing Jalen Petrie and the ripple effect that has on the secondary, I think is the third thing to watch. Number 4, protect C.J. Stroud. You guys know I've told you that's going to be a key. That's going to be a can in the 6-pack every week until they prove they can do it at a high level. We were back to him getting pressured 40% of the time in that loss to Tennessee. This is not a good Jags defense. I'll get into some of the numbers in just a second. But the one area where they're very talented is with their 2 edge rushers. Josh Hines-Allen, who's got 5 sacks on the year, and Trayvon Walker, former number 1 overall pick, has 7.5 sacks this year. So Trayvon Walker appears to be coming into his own for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I feel okay about that because that means it'll be, Laramie will have one of those guys. Titus Howard, I don't feel great about. I feel better about him than I do the interior of the offensive line. But they've got to protect C.J. Stroud. Enough of him getting hit, enough of these free runners. Juice Scruggs was miserable in that game last week against Tennessee. Stop letting C.J. Stroud get hit, please. Number 5, along those same lines, get well game potentially here, I think, for C.J. Stroud and the Texans offense. Just some numbers here for you on the Jags. The Jags are 28th in points allowed per game this season, nearly 29 points per game. They're 29th in third down conversion rate allowed. The Texans have been abysmal on third down, especially in the second half of games over the last month and a half. So maybe they get well on third down. They are 32nd dead last in the league in passer rating allowed, 111.5. C.J. Stroud in his last 4 games has not cracked the 80 barrier in passer rating. 80 is bad. He has not cracked that barrier in the last 4 games and 5 of the last 6 games. The only good game he's had statistically by passer rating is the Colts game in the last 6 games, that is. That's the only game he's had. I believe he had a passer rating right around 100 in that game. But the Jags are allowing the highest passer rating of any defense in the league. This should be a get-well game. This is not an environment you're going into where it should be super loud and hard to operate. That's not a loud stadium even when the Jags are good. The Jags suck. They're 2-9. So this should be a pretty easy place to operate. I could even imagine on Thanksgiving weekend there being a pretty big swath of Texan fans in Jacksonville, looking to get a little Florida weather maybe. in this game. So this should be, and please, can we get a second half touchdown? Can we get a second half touchdown? I'm not talking about a defensive touchdown. I'm not talking about a gift from the Cowboys on a short field. I'm talking about a real second half touchdown. You know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about like the second half touchdown the Texans scored in the final drive of the game against these very Jaguars in week 4. Now, I'd rather they not wait till the last 2 minutes to get said touchdown. I'd rather they do it, maybe like first drive of the third quarter. That would be better. But can we get a second half touchdown, please? I don't need another week of Bobby Slowick telling us how close we are. We're so close. Oh, just this one block here. And it's week 12, man. If you're this close 12 weeks into the season, you're not close at all. If that's what your excuse is, we're just so close. We're so close. That's a 1-week excuse. That's a 2-week excuse. 12 weeks, it's a you problem. All right. Can number 6, prediction. Texans 23, Jags 20. Texans are a 5-point favorite. I cannot in good conscience pick the Texans to cover a spread right now. Not the way they've played these last 6 games. Prove me wrong. The good news is I'm 2-9 against this spread picking the Texans this year. So they'll probably cover the 5 based on me giving this prediction. But 23-20, Texans, the final score. I think they get a win. I think we go into the bye week feeling okay. They're 8-5. They're leading the division. We'll see what happens. Colts play the Patriots this weekend. Then they have a bye next weekend as well. So maybe the Patriots can do the Texans a solid. The good news is teams are 1-11 the week after playing the Detroit Lions this year. I think the Texans are the one, actually. They beat the Cowboys the following week. So maybe the Colts have a little bit of that Lions hangover from last week from losing to them 24-6. All right, so that's it. A Thanksgiving edition preview of the Jags game. I'll be back on Sunday night, Monday morning with a recap of what is hopefully a Texans win. In the meantime, listen to Sports Radio 610 all week long. Again, we're in on Friday this week as a station, so keep it tuned there. Keep it tuned all weekend long. Enjoy all the football this weekend. Enjoy family. Enjoy friends. And we will see you early next week. We'll see you Sunday, Monday for a recap of the Jags and the Texans. Big thanks to Anthony Irwin, my producer, for getting this podcast to all of you. Big thanks to all of you for listening. We will see you next time. This has been the Utopia Football Podcast. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.